Welcome to the Business Spotlight series. My name is Kay Cote, and I'm your podcast host here at Action Coach in Central Texas. And today I have Scott Hendler, founder of and CEO of Hendler Flores Law, as my guest. Today we're going to be talking to him about his business, his journey to business ownership, and what it's really like to own and operate a business. If this is your first time on our channel, be sure to like and subscribe to get notifications when we drop episodes like this. Well, welcome, Scott. Thank you so much for taking time to be on the show today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes, well, I'd like to dive right in. Give us a bit about you and your business.
Well, I own and operate a law firm based in Austin, Texas, that represents individuals and their families throughout the United States in what we consider high value, single event, personal injury, and wrongful death cases. They often focus on toxic injury of some kind, but not always. It could be a catastrophic house fire or a commercial vehicle crash where people are seriously injured or killed. It's kind of a bit morbid when you talk about it like that, but people who are affected by those kinds of events really need to look to the courts for recourse and remedies. That's really how our country is founded, and that's really the best way for them to get some closure and measure of accountability.
Hmm. I looked briefly and looking into your business, and I read that you really focus on like the stories of your clients. Like they're you look at them in that way of like they're the person behind the case, and the client is that has the story. Can you share a little bit about that?
So I think that's a good point. It's so easy to get swept up in our business and use shorthand and talk about, cases. But uh, each case really involves a person or a family. And so we try to approach it from the standpoint that each person's story matters, and we want to help them tell it in a way that is compelling and will really affect the listener in a positive way. So we try to get away from this idea of treating our clients like commodities or a product that we're handling, because what we're doing really affects people's lives and has a profound impact on how they go forward with their life.
Mhm. Hmm. This is very powerful and very unique. And I'd like to dive into kind of like how your business is structured out, how you're conducting business. Are you the sole owner? Do you have partners or investors? How does that look?
So my law partner, who happens to also be my wife, Lulu Flores, and I own 100% of the law firm. We have a number of experienced lawyers who work with us, as well as about 10 support staff. And we manage cases around the United States with that team. And when we need to associate other lawyers in to work with us, we are fortunate enough to have a very strong network nationally with very, very talented lawyers around the country who we can invite in to work on a matter with us. We are a remote law firm now since the COVID epidemic or pandemic. We had to vacate our offices in March of 2020. And after about 10 months of working remotely, uh, fortunately for us, our lease was up. Our 5-year lease expired. And for reasons I can't explain, our landlord wanted to increase our rent, even though we hadn't been there for 10 months. So we decided to forego physical space and we work remotely now. That has some challenges, as you might expect, but it also has some benefits. And I think it gives people a great deal of flexibility, and most of my employees, I think, like it very much.
Mm-hmm. Mm. What are some of the challenges that you faced with being in a remote location?
Well, whenever you want to get together, you have to engage on a call or a video conference instead of being able to just walk into someone's office and sit down with a cup of coffee and kind of brainstorm and shoot ideas or have an impromptu conversation. I think some of the other challenges for individuals, especially parents with children at home, if they're working from home, they have to deal with those kinds of inevitable distractions that occur, um, that can sometimes interfere with your train of thought, your ability to focus, and things like that. But the trade-offs are enhanced flexibility and peace of mind and comfort that you're around your families or around your pets or in a comfortable environment. You're not spending time driving to and from the office. And of course, it helps us and me as a business owner reduce my overhead.
100%. I know I like to have my furry friend by my side when I'm doing my podcast.
Of course.
It does make a difference. So thank you for sharing about that. I'd like to dive into your role from day to day. It sounds like, being the CEO as well as being a lawyer. How do you find like a harmony there, or what's your day to day really look like?
Well, that's a very insightful question because it is a real challenge. Um, I have, over the last couple of years, tried a different model with a lawyer who had considerable experience to come in and manage the litigation for me so that only certain things would then get escalated to me and I could focus on the business of operating the business. Um, Unfortunately, he has decided to step back from the practice of law for a while, take a sabbatical. So he's leaving at the end of August. And I'm re-engaging both as the CEO and the principal trial lawyer in the firm. Nevertheless, I am really satisfied with the lawyers I have working with me now and their ability to self-manage and to work with each other and collaborate to manage. So I feel like I can modify my model some, and I don't need as much oversight or supervision because these lawyers are now capable and competent enough in their own right, I think, to manage their own responsibilities. That's not to say they don't need input from someone with a lot of experience. After all, I have over 30 years of experience in this field, and you inevitably learn a lot, probably more from your mistakes than from your successes. And I want to try and share that with the younger lawyers working in my law firm. And so, in that regard, I think that um, it's going to require a lot of my time going forward on specific cases that I focus on. And I'm also devoting time and energy to, raising funding or developing business or looking at new vendors and products that we want to use and incorporate to make our practice uh, uh, more efficient. So, in that regard, I'm a big believer in technology. And I think as a plaintiff's law firm, and maybe as a law firm in general, I've always tried to stay out on the front edge of technology. I don't
Mm,
consider myself a technologist per se, but I went to the cloud before any law firm I knew of was really embracing that idea. And now everyone is on the cloud. But I went on the cloud, I think, now 12 years ago.
okay.
Um, and the more that we can leverage technology to accomplish our goals for our clients, the better.
Hmm. Hmm. I think that's super important too. I love that you brought that up, because I was going to ask, how you're utilizing technology within your firm to help you. in regards to like CRMs to manage, customer client relations or any sort of vendor relations. Are you utilizing any forms of CRMs currently?
Well, sure. I mean, it's especially important in a law firm to have a an electronic uh, case management system. And built into that case management system, a part of that is a client relationship manager,
Mm,
right? There's contacts and reminders and communication channels that are secure. We use something called FileVine, which is a very popular case management program for a number of law firms that allows us to email or text directly with a client right out of our system
mhm,
and keep that message in their file so we can track our communications. We use some other products as well with like CS Disco, which is an Austin-based company that is what's called e-discovery or management of electronic data. And so much information now is either scanned or generated through technology that you have to be able to manage the data in the virtual space where it lives, right? So Disco is a very powerful program that we use. They have just rolled out a new AI or artificial intelligence component that I'm very anxious to learn about because I've heard it's really impressive. And AI in generally is just, it's like we're facing a tidal wave of it. It just came, it seems like out of nowhere and is just sweeping industry across businesses. And the practice of law is no exception. So trying to get a handle on on what artificial intelligence products will work for us, what don't, how to manage them, because you can get in trouble with what we do. So much of what we do is dependent on interfacing with courts
mhm,
or maintaining confidentiality, both of communications with our clients, but also of things that they provide us, like medical records, for example.
mhm.
So there's a lot of ins and outs to how to leverage that technology and those vendors. And so that's a challenge.
I could definitely see that, especially as things are kind of growing in the AI area and the technology realm, and kind of bringing it back to like in the business. What is something that you wish people knew more about your business?
Well, that's a really important question because I think, lawyers compared to everyone who's not a lawyer have a sort of superpower. We have superpowers, and some of us are superheroes and some of us are supervillains, and we can use those powers for good or evil. And it depends on your perspective on which is which. But one of the things lawyers do, and especially plaintiffs lawyers who represent people who have been seriously injured or the families of people who've been killed from defective products or some kind of corporate misconduct, is that litigation in this context changes things for the better. You probably wouldn't get into a car or buy a car that didn't have seatbelts.
Mhm.
But the reason cars have seatbelts is because lawyers sued auto manufacturers for not putting seatbelts in cars. The reason cars have airbags is because lawyers sued auto manufacturers for not putting airbags in the car and people getting injured when they knew how to do it. Um, the reason asbestos is almost not used anywhere anymore is because lawyers took on the asbestos industry and challenged their knowledge of how harmful asbestos was to the people who were coming in exposure with it. Lawyers bring lawsuits to challenge injustice and to right wrongs. And it's critically important to support the legal system and the plaintiff's legal system and access to the courts to continue to do that. You hear so much about frivolous lawsuits, but that's from the defendants. That's from corporate America talking about frivolous lawsuits. The fact of the matter is, there really aren't frivolous lawsuits, and certainly not brought by plaintiffs. And the reason for that is because it is very expensive to bring a lawsuit. It costs money to file the lawsuit. It takes time to prepare the lawsuit. It requires a lot of expenditures of expert witnesses and taking testimony and investigations, obtaining medical records. All of that costs a lot of money. And people don't generally bring frivolous lawsuits just to throw their money away. I mean, in terms of, putting some context to that, it is not uncommon for us to spend $250,000, $500,000 for a client in advance for their lawsuit. And of course, the client's not responsible for that unless we recover money for that client. And then any expenses that we have incurred would be repaid to us from our recovery. But if we fail, the client doesn't owe anything. That's the only thing that allows an average American, an average citizen, to take on a big corporation who's paying their lawyers $1,000 an hour, and they have 10 lawyers lined up to try to defeat your claim. And so I think the most important thing people should know is how important plaintiffs' lawyers are to the rights and freedoms and privileges that they don't even think about, that are just second nature in our society today.
Hmm. That's incredible insight, especially laying it out like that for people to understand. So I really thank you for that information. And it helps me to wrap my brain around too. Like, if anything, knock on wood, it doesn't come up, but it's nice to know this is where we turn to, is like folks like you who are helping make those changes. And kind of leads me perfectly into the next section of questions, which is about your marketing and how you're putting yourself out there, to meet with to help people. So what are some ways you are marketing yourself and your firm?
So I think the primary way we market our firm is really through what I call word of mouth marketing. And that's not just accidental. There's some deliberate efforts there. But it is talking to people about what we do, like this interview, for example. Making sure people that we know what we do and how we do it. I found out I had many friends who knew I was a lawyer, but didn't really understand what I did as a lawyer. And so I think it's important to talk to people, network with people, let them know what you do and how you do it and why you do it. That's probably our most effective way of marketing. We have found over the years that the most significant cases we have handled come to us that way. We have tried other kinds of marketing as well, whether it's internet advertisements about certain issues. Some years ago, we did some television advertising from an issue standpoint about how asbestos affected people and the kinds of diseases it caused, because people really weren't educated about it.
Mhm.
Dangerous pharmaceutical drugs that are on the market that pharmaceutical makers put out there, knowing that they have very serious health risks to people, but betting they're going to make more money selling them than the money they would have to pay to the victims.
Mhm.
And they've now turned that into a cost of doing business. It's unfortunate.
Mhm.
It's frustrating, but that's the world we're living in. And so we continue to take on pharmaceutical companies, chemical companies, insurance companies, all kinds of industry giants who try to exploit uh, the consumer for their, financial benefit.
Definitely. Well, thank you for sharing about that too. It's been great to spend some time focusing on your business and focusing on your marketing, but I'd really like to dive into your why. And so, why did you choose to go into business for yourself as opposed to working for somebody else? And what was that transition like for you?
Well, I was very fortunate as a young lawyer to work for a uh, legendary trial lawyer in Texas by the name of Fred Barron. And he has a firm, or Fred passed away several years ago, but his firm is Barron and Budd. Russell Budd now runs that firm, and Russell is quite an exceptional lawyer. Um, I was working very closely with Fred. I think we had 12 or 15 lawyers at the time, but had been assigned to work exclusively with Fred, and I traveled around the world with him on various cases. Um, and I was a young lawyer, and I was getting tutored and mentored by him. Um, and so I could accept some of the condescending way that Fred tended to talk to me or lecture me. But one day I was standing in the mailroom talking to Fred and Russell and realized that Fred was talking to his named partner, Russell Budd, in the same condescending tone he was talking to me. And I realized I had an epiphany that you're never, ever going to be in control of your own destiny there. Fred was the top banana, and what Fred said was pretty much how things went. And that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It was a very highly coveted job among young lawyers, and I was very fortunate to have it, and I learned a tremendous amount from Fred Barron. But I realized if I ever wanted to be in control of my own destiny, I had to go out on my own. And that was the epiphany I had. And it was a tough decision. A lot of people thought I was crazy for leaving such a prominent, successful law firm where I had been sort of tapped as would be the next partner in the law firm. I was on a very positive trajectory, but I realized I wanted to be my own person and go out and do things my own way. Not that the way they did things was wrong, just that I was the type of personality that really had to rely on my own judgment.
Mhm. Mm. Well, that is a really cool story. So, you were able to step away, and that is something I talk to many entrepreneurs about, is that kind of pivotal moment. So, thank you for sharing your pivotal moment. It's been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed talking to you and hearing about your firm. And I'd really like to dive into a fun series of questions, 4 questions called our rapid fire section.
Okay.
And so, if you're ready, we could dive into these where you answer top of mind, first thing that comes to your mind. Are you ready for some rapid fire?
Fire away.
All right. Question number 1 is, what is the key to success for you?
I think the key to success is not losing sight of the people we represent and how what we do affects their lives, and maintaining a personal relationship that is emp uh, empathetic of their needs and concerns.
Mm. And what is one piece of advice you have for other business owners?
Network, meet other businesses, especially in your industry, go to organizational meetings or conferences, um, spend money, invest in getting to know other people in your community, get out in the community, talk to people about what you do, and build relationships. Not necessarily just selling your business, but building a relationship with people, and then people know what you do, they're going to refer you business.
Definitely. And what is one book or any piece of content? It could be a podcast, anything that has impacted you recently.
Well, I recently finished a book called Covered with Night, and it is a remarkable story of a murder case that occurred 300 years ago in Pennsylvania when William Penn's colony was there and they were dealing with the uh, the 5 nations of native people that lived in the Northeast, and the contrast between Native American approach to reformative justice contrasted with Europeans' approach to pecuniary or uh, penal justice. And it was really a fascinating book. It's a true story, and the author is this remarkable uh, historian who was able to find records, detailed records that were kept 300 years ago
Mhm.
of everything that happened. So it was a really interesting contrast in our approach to criminal justice and a traditional Algonquin Iroquois nation approach to criminal justice.
Oh, that sounds like an incredible book. And our final question is, if you had to choose only one aspect of your business that you could rapidly improve overnight, what would it be?
I think access to funding, financial funding to help support cases brought by individuals who are challenging injustice. So that's one of the greatest limitations for people is being able to access the courts on a level that can meet the extraordinary resources that major corporations have to defend their cases. And I think that there should be some source of governmental funding like they have in England, where they extend costs for that. They don't pay the fees necessarily, but they certainly cover the costs, which can be very substantial.
Definitely. Well, thank you for sharing that and advice. And before we get to our final question of the day, how can people find you?
Uh, they can Google my name, Scott Hendler, Hendler. They can go to our website, which is hendlerlaw.com, uh, or they can Google Lulu Flores, and they'll find her. Lulu is a state representative here in Texas and represents Southeast Travis County as well as a partner in our law practice. So Scott Hendler, Lulu Flores, hendlerlaw.com, any one of those will get you to me.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Scott. For our final question of today, what is most inspiring to you today?
I think um, the hope and the excitement that's being generated by Kamala Harris's presidential um, um, candidacy. I think that we need to move on to a new chapter in our country and not repeat mistakes of the past, whether it's from a Democratic standpoint or a Republican standpoint. I think we need a new generation of leaders to take the country forward. And seeing what's happening there, that in the convention beginning tonight in Chicago, I'm inspired by it.
Oh, well, wonderful. Thank you so much, Scott. It has been a joy to get to know you and your business on the show today.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation.